Yay. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and happy first TA Thursday of spring. So today's session, we will be revisiting the topic of Indigenous evaluation with MDH's Jacob Walker Swaney and AICAF's Wyatt Pickner and Veronica Seifert. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to our host for today. A little bit of a further ado, after the session today, please stick around for an evaluation survey that we will be dropping into the chat. Now, without further ado.
Jacob, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Do you have a slideshow ready, or who's going to do that?
One, I can pull it up on my screen.
Okay. Because I don't know that I have permissions to do that.
You are now one of our fabulous co-hosts, so you should have too.
Ooh, cool. Let me see here. I have too many screens open. This is interesting. Okay. See if this works.
I am just moving a few things around here and then can get it pulled up.
Can you see it now?
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Let me move this little camera thing. Okay. When you have 3 different screens open, it's really hard to know where your mouse is at. Okay. Good morning, everyone. As stated earlier, we are doing part 2 of Indigenous evaluation training, and really the premise of today is to kind of lay some groundwork for you all on what we mean by visioning and what that could look like as we progress through and do an evaluation for your deep dives. So yeah, with that, we are going to do a little bit of an icebreaker. And if you could let us know in the chat what your name is, the tribal community you serve, and what are some core values that you bring to your work and that are guiding principles, so to speak, for you and your work. So if you could take a moment and write that in the chat, that would be great. And let me see here. I'll be monitoring the chat on the side here. Can everyone see the chat or not? All right. Let's see Veronica. Whoop. Great. Great. So far we have some values of, let's see here, start at the top. Values so many things, but working for community and letting community determine the solutions and process to those solutions. Inclusiveness, culture is prevention, food is medicine, community input and engagement. kinship and engagement, and then the 7 Anishinaabeg values, humility and respect, community engagement and input, and the knowledge within the communities guides the work, bettering the lives of others, community communication, allow communities to determine the best ways to carry out their work. Yeah, this is all great and really awesome to set the stage for today's training. As move slides. So we just did our introductions and we all pretty much know each other, but it's all really nice to see you all in the virtual space. And hopefully we can do some more in-person things as we get progressing throughout the year and with the current pandemic behaving and not giving us too much trouble. And so we just kind of go with the flow as we've been doing. And so the first part of this training, we want you all to bring, like we've put up here, some of the guiding principles and values of your work that bring you here to this work every day. And so we're going to allow those to guide our evaluation and make sure that we always come back to those values and are adhering to it. So it's somewhat like a mission statement, but more so like a mission value statement that you might see being done for nonprofits, et cetera, when they're deciding the direction of their nonprofit. Oftentimes that's a common practice to set your mission, vision, and values. So with that, of the 4 phases that I had mentioned in the previous training, today we are going to be discussing this visioning phase. And so a huge part of that is really identifying key stakeholders as well as all applicable people in your community and around your program or your evaluation, which is the program activity that you're wanting to evaluate. So the technical definitional term from evaluation is evaluand. So you might hear me say that here and there, and that's what that means. It's the program activity or whatever you're deciding to do a structured evaluation around. So in this visioning phase, however, this is where we're planning on how to truly engage you all's community that you work for and are from, and how best to do that and how strategically we can engage these stakeholders to make sure that we assign proper control and power distribution of the evaluation so that it moves forward in a very smooth fashion, but always allowing times for reflection as well as times for revisiting the control, right? So like it's really good practice to view evaluation, Indigenous evaluation as a living entity. And it's like our relative, right? We're always allowing growth in that process. And through that process, we can always come back to these items at any point in time to revisit them and reset our values if things are not working, and take people off the list, so to speak, or put more people on the list or more entities on the list as needed as we're progressing along. Because what we will see when we do an evaluation is we are consistently learning lessons as we go. So in that way, this will be a transformative participatory evaluation process where we are actively hoping to empower you all and build y'all's capacity with evaluation in this process. So with that, we're going to do another Jamboard session. And so I'll let Veronica take it from here. This was your slide, right, Veronica? I can't see the little notes.
Yeah, can you click on that link?
Yep.
Oh, that was interesting.
Oh, sweet. So yeah, you already filled it out. Great. Yeah, teamwork is the dream work. Okay, so Veronica has taken all of y'all's input from the beginning and in the chat box and put it in here. So we are going to come back and visit this as we progress along in this training. And here I will pass the mic. to the slideshow. Let me stop sharing my. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you can go to the next slide. So yeah, as we've been talking about, the values as guiding principles is something that we want to start with to, use that inclusiveness and ground us collaboratively in the intentions we bring to the work. And so I really appreciate you doing that with us today. And it's something that's been passed down to us from the framework that Joan LaFrance, built into the Indigenous Evaluation Framework, that naming our values is that first step in developing an Indigenous approach to evaluation. And it centralizes those values to bring into our practices and bring it into our methods. So I saw a lot of people bring in, the community guides the work. And that's exactly what we're working on today. So that's really great. The first step is, how are we bringing the community into the work? Who is going to be involved and how much are they going to be involved, and planning that out so we are inclusive. Also, when we're involving the community, a lot of the values that you brought up, kinship, respect, honesty, humility, wisdom, love, truth, courage, and bettering the lives of others are those intentions. So Indigenous evaluation is formed and becomes what our traditional values and our collective work evolves it to be. So this framework isn't something that you just have to fill in the blanks. It's something that we create together. And I really like that this process recognizes each other's values and what we each bring to the table. And that is part of the commitment to our community and each other. So that's how I see that influencing the work. And it can mean many things. Wyatt and I have some guiding principles that we want to bring to our evaluation when we first meet with anyone to start an evaluation plan. And that is community-centered, relationality, tribal sovereignty. And these things come into play in our evaluation practices as like community-centered, doing the stakeholder involvement process and figuring out the leaders or the members of the community that are going to do the evaluation strategies with us and plan that out. Relationality is acknowledging, our relatives, past and present and future, wanting to be inclusive of youth and elder perspectives, and acknowledging the land, the context of where we are in time and space. And tribal sovereignty, we've been working, with MDH, and MDH has been working really hard to bring that into an agreement, like a joint powers agreement, to acknowledge tribal nations and their sovereignty and owning the data. So it's not the funders that own all of this work and the results, but it's actually you who are providing the information. So these values do tie into how we create our evaluation plans. And it's really great that we can set that tone first. So other values that we have is that continuous improvement, flexibility. As I said, like us naming the values to each other is what forms the work. So there's flexibility in how we create the plan and also how it evolves, as input continues, as we are trying things and maybe it works and maybe we have to adjust it. And healing, wanting to acknowledge people's mental health and how we approach people and ask them for information, and respectfully doing that through generosity. If we want to, give gifts, to acknowledge the work that they put into creating this plan or answering our questions or building the work that we're trying to create, and also including culture into that process as well. So do we open with a prayer whenever we have a meeting space? Do we offer tobacco to elders when we ask them for knowledge? And also wanting to do a strength-based evaluation so that we offer those healthy processes and also the solutions that are community-led, and use that in talking about our communities and going forward with our work, so that we can lift people up and celebrate what we are doing. So I think you guys can see like the values are tied into our work and how we try to tie them in. So that's why I'm really glad that you have brought your values. And if you want to add more values, please feel free to keep filling them into the chat, and I'll fill up that Jamboard with all of those values that we want to include and how it guides us. So that was one of our first steps in visioning, and now we're going to go on to that community building as well.
And we'll also say that as we're going along throughout our evaluations, that at any one point in time, when we're working with you one-on-one in your community, whether that's me and AICAF, and of course, by whatever it is, all of the resources that we're developing today, we can also access during that time. So the Jamboard session where we have all of this existing data, so to speak, we can definitely bring that up when we're working with you and developing out your data. Just want to make sure you all were aware of that. So as we can see here, this is our evaluation plan for all of the evaluations moving forward, and allowing you and your community to drive us through these phases. So right now we are doing this visioning and developing a plan to engage our stakeholders that we can then go forth and actually engage those stakeholders and what that would look like. Whether who and what, and assigning those roles during that time is for that visioning process, and then building a consensus.
Your is kind of giving some distortion or static. I wonder if it's something.
That's not good.
I know.
Maybe you ought to take the lead, Veronica. That might happen.
Yeah, let me know. Do you want to try anything? Or yeah, I've heard the static too, Lorraine. So.
Okay. I'm gonna stop my video, but go ahead, sorry. Go ahead, Veronica, and take control and go ahead.
Yeah, or Wyatt, if you have anything to add as well.
It also might be, I think sometimes if there's multiple things running, I could try sharing my screen in the slides too. I don't know if that, sometimes I think that's been an issue.
Yeah, go ahead, Wyatt. Do that. I'll stop sharing, and then you guys can take over for the rest. Just because I know I've had issues with my end on Zoom, so let's just transition that way.
Yeah, let's try this because I would love to hear more from you, Jacob, if you have anything to add.
Yeah. Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
I've still got some.
Same.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I've said pretty much all I wanted to say in this part, so feel free to take leadership, Veronica and Wyatt, and we can go from there. We want quality, so go for it.
Okay, so as we went over all of those phases in our last evaluation training, we are in phase 1 where we are doing this visioning. We've done some values to ground us and have guiding principles. And as we go forward, that one of the initial steps as well is to engage stakeholders and build a consensus on the plan, the evaluation plan. So we're just letting you know here that this overview of our multiple phases of an evaluation, we are in phase 1 in the visioning stage. Do you want to go ahead, Wyatt? And feel free to jump in and add anything, Wyatt, as we go forward. So next slide.
All right. I was trying to get the little toolbar and the video things are overlapping. There you go.
Also, I want to add too, if anyone has any questions or you want us to go over anything again, feel free to add that in the chat as well. But with the visioning phase, what do you want to evaluate is a very good first question, and figuring out who then the program stakeholders are to be involved in what you want to evaluate. So with the MDH SHIP program, we're hoping to have one activity that you can choose from tobacco or SHIP or together, both of them. One activity, and then you figure out like who are the key players in that activity that are either involved in participating or involved in the planning, or tribal councils or tribal elders that should be involved just to have some guidance in this. So with those people in mind, we develop a stakeholder engagement plan. How do you want to involve them? There can be many levels of involvement, from just having them help with interview questions or actually forming an entire evaluation plan over the course of this entire activity evaluation for the MDH SHIP program. And we did do a logic model in our last evaluation training. And so we did part of that as an exercise. And then today we are going to do an exercise where we have brought to you a case study that we can try to hash out who the different stakeholders are involved in kind of an activity, more like a situation. Go ahead with the next slide, Wyatt, unless anyone has anything to add.
I was just going to say, again, I think that on this, it's kind of identifying all the different key pieces here of like, again, what do you want to evaluate, who needs to be involved, to what extent, and just trying to figure out like what are all those different pieces that need to be involved, because we want to make sure that as we move this project forward, that we're engaging the right people, and we're not leaving anyone out that should be involved. And so this is that first stage of trying to figure out some of those pieces, and make sure that we move forward in a good way.
Yeah, so to practice that with you all, we wanted to bring us all together and try it with a scenario. I don't know how many of you have seen Rutherford Falls. I think it's a pretty fun show, and it's set in a community where there's founders and their family, and they have a statue in the center of the city. And then it's all founded, of course, on Minneshanka Nation. So there is a tribal community involved as well. And one of the scenarios that we're hoping to mediate or bring together in an evaluation plan is if we need to remove a statue because cars keep driving into it. It's placed in the city in a certain location in the road, like at the center of an intersection, but cars keep driving into it. And so the mayor decides to move the statue, but one of the, well, sort of ancestors of the original Rutherford, who founded the city, wants to keep the statue in its place, of course. And Reagan Wells is a Minneshanka Nation member who is a very good friend of the ancestor of Rutherford. She wants to help her friend, but she's also kind of torn because this might be an opportunity for the Minneshanka Nation then to address what the statue means to them and what its absence could mean, and them trying to, reclaim more presence in this community that they were originally from. So Nathan Rutherford's family member and self-appointed champion of the statue and stands to defend it from the mayor taking it down. And then we have some other players from the Minneshanka Nation and from the community of Rutherford Falls. In the next slide. Hopefully you guys, some of you have seen it. Otherwise, we have a description of all the players here. Nathan Rutherford's a proud descendant of the town's founder who runs the town's Heritage Museum. And of course, he's the one who's trying to defend the statue from being taken down. Terry Thomas is the CEO of Minneshanka's Casino, who also envisions some very big things for the nation, his community, the Minneshanka Nation. And so he is an advocate for the statue to be taken down. Reagan Wells, as mentioned in the brief before, is the best friend of Nathan, but she's also a member of the Minneshanka Nation. And so she has dreams of championing the history of her people. She wants to open up a cultural museum for her people. And so she's placed kind of in the middle of this, definitely in the middle of this. Jesse Lee is a driven high school student, Nathan's personal assistant. Josh Carter, a passionate journalist looking for the real story of Rutherford Falls. And Dana Wilson as Deidre Chisenhall, mayor of Rutherford Falls. So we have a mayor. We have Rayanne, who's an elder of the Minneshanka Nation. She's a storyteller and a language speaker. And she knows a lot of the, I would say, true history of Rutherford Falls and the founder, Rutherford. Dudley Rutherford, Nathan's brother. So the Rutherfords have a larger family of ancestors around the statue. And they also have a communications vice president, Caitlin, for Rutherford Inc. So there's a company even founded under the Rutherford name. Jess Wells, Reagan's cousin and Terry's assistant. We've got casino employees, Wayne and Sally. We've got Maya Thomas, Terry, who's the CEO of Minneshanka's Casino, Terry's daughter, Maya Thomas. And we've got Aunt Joan, Nathan's aunt, who has all the Minneshanka artifacts, as well as Rutherford family knowledge. And we have Rutherford Falls residents, Minneshanka tribal members, and then the shareholders of Rutherford Inc. So we've got quite a spread to consider in who we might want to involve in this decision of the statue and what impacts it could have if it remained or if it was taken down. We would like to go into some activity planning around. Oh, is there a slide beforehand? Yeah. The stakeholder engagement plan then. And this is something that Joan LaFrance shared with Jacob. And boy, Jacob, if your sound wasn't so buggy, I would love it if you could talk more about this.
So,
yeah.
okay, we're gonna try it, and I will do my best. So, with this is more or less a figure to kind of conceptualize how we're gonna plan stakeholder engagement. So what I mean by that is you identify a stakeholder, right? And then one of the first things you want to do is understand what would be the most effective control for that person or entity to have of the overall evaluation. That could be something from control of decisions being made, or being entirely just a participant of the evaluation and a person that we can gather data from. And so kind of that spectrum, right? Like this entity or being would have kind of drive the evaluation or be more of a supportive role. So those are things to think about.
Levels of involvement.
And then, what's that?
Levels of involvement in the.
Exactly.
Right.
And then what we mean when we say is stakeholder selection for participation, that could be ranging from a restriction to primary users to inclusion of all legitimate groups. So don't feel like you have to be limited into any one thing, but really it's about how to like who has a stake in your evaluation and who would be really beneficial for your program. And in all of these selections, you want this to be I could jump through the phone. Hang on a second, bear with me. Actually. Okay, give me 5 minutes here.
Jacob is going to try hopping off and then hopping back on again because the audio was fine when he first came on. So Veronica, if you'd like to take over where he left off.
Yeah, sure. And I just really value Jacob's input because this is something meaningful to him. To me, this is, basically I would sum it up as that participation scope of looking at, when you think of a person who's going to be involved into the evaluation planning, where in the 6 directions would you place them? And sometimes one person can hold multiple involvement levels depending on their position in the tribe and in the community and in the evaluation or in the activity. They could be both a participant and a tribal elder. So you might have some people who fit into more than one role in your evaluation. I hear Jacob connecting to audio.
And this might be a good place to also see if there's any questions or clarifications that anyone has before we, and I think we'll go through the form that we're going to do and kind of walk through that all together before we go into our breakout rooms and practice this as a group. So any questions so far?
Wyatt, can you hear me?
Yes, and that's so much better.
Yay!
Okay. And by all means, if you have a question, ask it now. I can go over my spiel in a minute. All right. So if you do happen to have any question, feel free to write those in the chat or email us directly and we will get back to that. So kind of what I was also getting at is once we have selected our stakeholders, you also want to assign the depth of participation. And that could be as involved as a deep involvement with the evaluation where we're involved, that person or entity is involved in all aspects of the evaluation from design, data collection, data analysis, and reporting to decisions about dissemination of results and use. Or it could simply be something as simple as consultation about best practices in your community that you work for. So it's on a continuum, and I will say that there is no right or wrong answer when we fill out these documents. And as we're going along, like I said at the beginning, we can always revisit this document and rework it to best suit this process. And that's all I had. Next slide. Okay, so I can kind of go over this. So for example, from our wanting to understand the impact of Big Larry's statue, one of our stakeholders, we've identified that Nathan Rutherford is a good stakeholder to have in this evaluation. And we're assigning the role of the Rutherford family expert in the control of the evaluation. Thinking of Nathan's character in the show, if you all have seen it, he's a very passionate individual about the Rutherford family, has extreme knowledge of the town's history. But as we're doing evaluation, from my perspective, I would not want Nathan Rutherford to have control over the evaluation, so to speak, of like making programmatic decisions. However, I do want him involved for providing contextual knowledge. And so a part of this evaluation is sometimes we want to make sure that we're understanding it from a vision of community lens. So we want to also think about, you know, if it's the case that this person is extremely passionate about their family and we get negative results, how are we going to handle that? So part of that is we can say, you know, he can provide direction and consultation as well as historical context, but we really don't know that we want to give him as much control over the evaluation as outside researchers coming in. But if we're allowing the community to drive this, he should have a larger say in the control of it, but we also want to make sure that we don't allow him to control the entire evaluation. So those are just kind of some of the thought process that run through my head. And then the depth of the participation, we definitely want him engaged in the planning and the design, and maybe the analyzing. And what we mean by analyzing is, you know, he has such a rich contextual history that as we're analyzing qualitative data that we get from our data collection period, we can ensure that things are accurate to what we're actually trying to measure, right? So like that we have it written down correctly as researchers and evaluators, that we gathered the information correctly. So yes, he's a part of the data analyst, analyzation. But yeah, it's kind of muddy there, but that's some things to think about. And then the other stakeholder is the Minneshanka Nation, and their role, from what I could think of in like 2 minutes, would be that they would be the Minneshanka Nation expert. And they would also provide direction and historical context and planning the evaluation and designing and analyzing and reporting. So, you know, being tribal sovereign nation, they should have a direct say in how their data is disseminated and represented, and making sure that that data and the dissemination plans reflect a respective process in disseminating our data. And within all of this, we want to make sure that we get a good story and that all parties are quote unquote not upset with us. So it's like a delicate
balancing act of how best do we go about that process and how do we assign those controls. And if at any one point in time, we can always revisit that and change these as we need. Veronica and Wyatt, do you have any input as well?
I think that this form is helpful to just kind of organize all that information and keep track of, who all, again, you're looking to involve and to what extent. That way, as you start to move through this, you can refer back to it and, say, are we including all these right people or all the right people at the right stages? And how do you want to engage with them, to what extent? So. Anything else before we jump into the breakout rooms? I believe that's the next slide here. I'm going to start assigning people to breakout rooms. Jacob, I'm going to have you in room 1, Veronica in room 2, and then I'll be room 3. And we'll go through this kind of like we did last time, and we'll start to fill out this form and get some ideas and try to provide some good experience and perspective on doing this. Okay, give me just a second here.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Kenna, can you hear me?
class. All right, I want to extend my apologies to everybody if we didn't get enough time for that. This is something that we will most likely be spending a lot of time with you all on, because as you can see, this is a very thought intensive process. So yeah, but this was a great little exercise. Wyatt, do you want to take over?
Yeah. Let's see here. Let me pull this back up. So the last thing that we have for you here, nope, that's not the one I wanted. Is to, again, last time we did an evaluation towards the end that was a little more fun, of seeing where you were at with feeling about evaluation. And we did that through 80s love songs. Is the right screen sharing now? Do you see the memes? And so if this is, I'm not sure, that I didn't get a chance to make a poll on this. And so I don't know if there's a poll that's already up, but we could also put this into the chat. So that might be the easiest with the time that we have left here. So how are you feeling about evaluation? A is kind of mad and just like, yeah. B is sad. C, confused. The face I make when I'm asked to plan an Indigenous evaluation. D is curious, and E is excited. So if you could enter that information in the chat there, that would be great. And this is a survey that was, or a scale that was developed by UIHI. And so, you know, this, I think we want to just highlight that there are many ways that we can collect data and information in a way that, you know, isn't just written form, and we can make it, you know, more funny and interesting. Okay, so we got some E, D, D's, E's, D and E. Okay, so most people are either confused or excited, or curious, sorry. I'm getting those mixed up. Curious or excited. So that's really good to hear. Anyone want to share any thoughts or anything before we wrap up about their responses? Or Jacob and Veronica, if you have anything to add.
Veronica, do you have anything?
About this? No, I do want to see how people are feeling about the evaluation, and I do hope, like with the last couple of minutes, we can see if people want to chat about how that process went for them too. Because I do want to say in my group, I think it was fun, and there's a little bit of adjustment to try to get used to, you know, how we're doing it. But I really love the conclusion that we came to in how we wanted to involve the community, and I've really also appreciated that. I think they enjoyed that we wanted to bring the community into the planning and how we approached getting our answers and solutions. But I'm definitely wanting to hear from anyone who wants to chime in about what that process was for them, what more information they want, and what they thought of the memes.
Lorraine says she loved the memes. And, you know, again, those are just a couple options of how we're thinking of trying to be creative. So if there's other ideas that you think are relatable or, you know, interesting to ask about, then we can certainly incorporate those. The idea that we had that we were going to do, and I'm going to try to work on this to have this as an option as we continue to work, is using viral TikTok sounds to describe things. So that's another option that we're thinking about.
And I'll end on, you know, as we're moving along, we're always trying to make this a fun process. So like Wyatt said, use TikTok things, but also knowing full well that, if we're trying to engage our elders as well, we can come up with an entire playlist from anything like Hank Williams Jr., Merle Haggard, anything, you name it, we will come up with it that will like kind of break down a lot of barriers of like just kind of like what is this social like angst almost, and really try to make it an engaging and fun process. And overall, what we want to see happen with this evaluation is that we allow y'all's community to really speak through this process and tell the story of ship and tobacco in your community and how your great work has been received, has benefited, impacted, etc. And so that's the hope with all of this, and that's why we try to make it as fun as possible, using popular cultural reference from whatever generation we are working with. And with that, I don't have anything else. So Wyatt, I will leave it to you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just note, I really like the feedback that Megan provided in the chat of having that other category, because I think we definitely want to be inclusive of, other things that we might not be thinking about. So that's really helpful. I think the last thing that was mentioned earlier is that there's a link in the chat to a Qualtrics survey to provide some feedback to us, and that's linked there again. So please fill that out when you get an opportunity to. But otherwise, I really appreciate this time with you all. Thank you for joining. Veronica, I'll hand it over to you for any final words you have.
No, just Nagwich everyone for joining us in this process. And I look forward to actually working with you on your activities and doing this in your communities. So hopefully this at least, breaks the ice on that process and shows you that we're definitely wanting to work with you on this and not push any agenda or and have the community guide the work. So I'm going to just kind of give some space right now. I would love to hear any feedback, questions. Feel free to put it in the chat. I really love the feedback we've gotten. And take the time to jump on that survey because we will take any notes from that as well to help refine our processes. Yeah, have an amazing weekend too. Yay.
All right, thanks everyone.